English, Greek, and a little bit of Spanish.
I speak 2 languages, English and Spanish.
I speak English and I understand Spanish, but don't really speak it well.
I only speak English.
I'm only fluent in English, but I know some German and sign language.
I mainly speak English, but I dabble in French.
I speak primarily English. I did take Spanish for 5 years, but it hasn't been enforced.
I speak English and Spanish.
I speak English. I'm proficient in French. I know very basic Spanish, Chinese, and sign language.
Fluently, I speak English, Benin, and Latin, but I understand Chichewa, French, Italian, Flemish, and Spanish.
English, Spanish, Korean.
There are like a lot of things that like I grew up only knowing in Greek, and then I try to like I have to describe it to people in order to like get it because I don't know what the specific word is. And the same thing goes for translating things from English to Greek, where there's certain things that just are not translatable.
It wasn't until I signed up for a course called bilingual writing that I got to write in both of my languages, and I got to fully express myself because a lot of the thoughts that I have are in Spanish, and there's actually no way of translating those thoughts in a creative way. So it was until that class that I actually felt comfortable with my identity as a Nicaraguan here at Emerson.
It's just that some things cannot translate. Like if you translate them literally, the meaning of what I'm trying to say does not go into it. And that happens a lot with like sayings that they only exist in the Spanish like speaking world. For example, there's this one that we use, me and my roommates use a lot. It's called La gota que colmó la copa, which if you translate it literally, it's the last drop of water that makes the cup like spill, like makes the fill cup like full up, whatever. I'm having problems right now. Like it's basically saying it's like, oh, you're pushing me over the edge. That's the last straw. But when you're trying to say that and communicate it, you only have that thing in your head and you don't know how to translate it as English, and you're like, how can I communicate my feelings? But it's so hard. So that happens a lot.
I think I know what I want to say, so one way or another, you're going to know what I want to say to you.
Yes, I think everybody has an accent. Even people who speak English, everybody has an accent. There's no question about it.
Thank you.
I think I've acquired a slight accent only because I'm around a lot of different cultures, especially Hispanic people.
Would you ever try to get rid of it?
No, I don't see any problem with it.
I believe that everyone has an accent. It just depends on who's listening. Personally, I don't hear anything, but I have heard a lot of people say that I sound like I'm from Minnesota or Northern Canada.
Well, I probably wouldn't be here if I didn't know English, so it had a huge impact. I probably wouldn't have the same educational opportunities if I didn't know English, because there aren't any journalism schools back in Nicaragua, so I feel like that's a huge impact right there.
So language didn't have any effect in your choice of college?
No, because I go to a music school.
Okay.
Music has no language barriers.
I definitely wanted to come to a place where I knew it would be as diverse as I felt that I was as a person, so I wanted to be able to interact with people that I knew would have had similar experiences that I have, or people that I could communicate with on a level outside of just English or just based on American culture.
Actually, I think I've always wanted to come to the States for college because, I mean, the United States has this reputation of higher education and, like, ability to go beyond, you know, what you could find professionally. So being bilingual allowed me to apply to colleges. Like, everybody at my school had that opportunity, but I know people that do not have that opportunity to just go to the University of Puerto Rico. And it's a great school nonetheless, but I probably think that if they could have spoken English or learned, they could achieve more like I have the opportunity to. It's interesting because there's a pretty big community of, for example, Latin Americans here at Emerson. So if I find myself comfortable somewhat, but when people find out that I actually speak Spanish, they're like amazed. And that doesn't stop only at Emerson, that stops everywhere. That's like everywhere. Everywhere I go, they're like, oh, that's so cool that you speak Spanish, can you teach me something? Or, oh, I took like Spanish all of high school, but all I can say is like hi or something. So it's like, I'm like used to everybody being amazed that I can speak another language that's beyond Spanish, but here at Emerson there's people who speak like Russian and like Greek, they speak Turkish, they speak all of this, so it's interesting that I'm the one in those shoes being like, wow, that's so interesting that you know all these languages, can you like teach me, etc. So I don't feel that much of a foreigner.
And also, just by knowing English, I've been able to learn more about other cultures, just because I feel like English is such an international language now.
All my family speaks Spanish, so I'm the one that they have to speak English to when they're saying something because they think that, you know, if I can't speak it, I don't understand it, so it kind of sucks.
Do you feel you're missing out on a big part of your culture?
I do, actually. I wanted to get Rosetta Stone to actually speak Spanish so I could actually fit in with my culture. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Because we're such a diverse culture, and for me, I'm two different ethnicities, so going to my mother's family's house, like, it's kind of nice when they're talking about me, making fun of me, that I can be like, that's what I hear you're talking about. So that's one of the reasons I tried to learn beginner Chinese, and just my grandmother would stop frowning at me.
Like you change personalities with the language you speak?
Definitely. I think every language has a different, not just the tone of it, but also a different flair to it. So I think with every language I speak, either you feel more proper, or you feel a little bit more lively, or you feel like reserved. So yeah, I think having different languages is nice because you can express yourself in different ways.
Actually, this is hilarious. Like, I find myself when I'm speaking English to use some Spanish words, and people find me sassy because of it. And I like it because my personality is more like that now because I've meshed between both and I use it as part of who I am now. Before I would just like stay speaking one language. Like if I'm in the States, I speak English. If I'm in Puerto Rico, I speak Spanish. But now I like mesh them and it's part of who I am, and I've learned that through my process and the people I've met here at Emerson that made me feel more comfortable with who I am. So that's cool.
Well, I think that since I'm more comfortable with English, I'm just like more free in the way that I speak in English because I'm more comfortable with it, and then like I find myself when I'm speaking in Greek, it's a little bit more hesitant because like I want to make sure I say the right thing, but like especially when I'm speaking Spanish because I only learned it like in a classroom, I'm like very bad at speaking it because I'm like afraid that I'll be wrong, or I'm not as comfortable with the language itself, so.
Just whenever the opportune moment arises, I guess. Whenever I, see my fellow countrymen, or whatever, some girl asks me to say something in Korean.
Usually whenever I'm back home, I mostly speak Spanish. Here, I mostly speak English, but currently I'm living with other Spanish speakers, so I find myself talking Spanish way more than I thought I would be doing here.
It's actually Spanglish, because I learned English and Spanish at the same time.
You kind of have to learn the language if you're going to live in the country. It comes with living there.
I learned English, that's an interesting story, because back home in Puerto Rico, everybody learns English when they're in kindergarten, but I actually learned English since I was born, because my parents worked, so they found a woman to take care of me who's actually American and lives in Puerto Rico, so she taught me, so I started speaking English when I was like 2 years old, maybe.
I just think they're kind of interesting. It's like little puzzle pieces, putting them together. It's kind of what I think of languages as. So they're interesting. So I started learning French because I hated my French teacher and I thought he was boring. So I would teach myself French instead. I thought French was interesting. And then I took high school sign language, which I just found really interesting, and the whole deaf culture in general is super exciting.
I've been learning here at Emerson for the past 3 years.
How is learning sign language different from learning a spoken language?
I think that a lot of people would assume it's easier, but it's really not. And we here at Emerson have this great opportunity in that all our professors are actually deaf. So it's completely immersive, and I mean they can write and read English, but I mean it's hard. It's a completely different thing. You have to use every part of your body, and you're not used to that. So.
I think it affects it, not personally myself, but it limits you to being able to communicate with other languages and other cultures.
Because you're speaking the dialect from your country, where everybody around you speaks the same language. They look like you, more or less. So obviously you're going to feel a certain connection with them. Because you were raised the same way, you speak the same language, you said the same things, most likely. You just feel more connected.
I think it's extremely important, and more emphasis needs to be put on learning another language. It's helpful if you want to do just about anything these days. You should know more than one language. I thought it was wrong.
No, we actually can't afford to not be Chinese. Para que se vea que fuimos tenemos que atender un evento, ¿verdad? Sí. Grandmother. Entonces es el evento que
I think globalization, you want to be his friends and want to talk to as many people as you can.
It's really important to know another language because we live in a world that's really full of so much interesting things and so much different cultures that it would be a waste to just enclose our minds into one aspect when there's so much to learn around the world, and one shouldn't think that you can learn about the world within your viewpoint. You should also push yourself out of your comfort zone and try to learn through other people's eyes and stuff. And I think language it helps that a lot. So a lot of people who are eager to learn, I cannot emphasize it more. Whoever wishes to go beyond only speaking English is a perfect person.
Oh, definitely, especially when you're in a higher learning environment. If you want to have a lot of success in the world, you definitely need to know more than one language.
How are you doing?